Hello, welcome to the Principia Podcast. I'm your host, James Ives. Today I am joined by Elvis, and we will be talking about international student life. How are you, Elvis?
I'm well. How are you, James?
I'm doing pretty great. Yeah, doing pretty well. So Principia is home to many international students ranging from France, Germany, Italy, Europe, South America, you name it. What has your experience been as an international student and adapting to living in the States and education here?
It's been great. Principia is very welcoming to international students. It's welcoming to everybody, but Principia has welcomed, especially me as an international student, in a way that I never expected. There are definitely some challenges that come with being an international student, and those challenges differ from like a European international student, a South American national student, an African national student. We all have like hoops we have to go through, but I think we're all super grateful for the opportunity to be here at Principia.
Originally for you, what influenced you to become a part of the Principia culture?
So my two friends, Fasha and Jimmy, came to Principia the year before me, and it was something that I had conversations about. But when they left church, I was like, I can't stay, like I felt like kind of alone. And also it seemed like a great opportunity for me to kind of like grow and like get out of my shell, become the best version of me that I possibly could be. But they definitely influenced like how quickly I did my applications and stuff.
Right, of course. Do you think like education may have played a role in your influence like coming here?
Yes, 100%. Definitely the American education system, in my opinion, is amazing.
Is it better than maybe what you would have had in Kenya?
It is better in terms of it looks way better on your resume. It looks way better on, like when you tell someone you studied in America, it looks better. The Kenyan system is very tough. It's very like get up at 4 a.m. and go to bed at midnight or 1 a.m. type of thing from a
That would be a normal
age.
school schedule?
That's a very normal school schedule for a high schooler. And so getting to be here where you can learn, but at the same, you can work hard but not like exhaust your mind all the way was a fantastic opportunity.
For sure. Absolutely. What things, like you mentioned there are like hurdles that you had to go through. What would those be?
I know, like, especially for me, you're very independent. We, especially the African international students, we don't have our parents here to help us. We look for parents in other people that we find here, but it's never gonna be the same advice that your mom would give you. And yes, you get to call them, but it's a different vibe. Definitely financially, it's a strain because like when I came here at 15 years old, I was paying my own bill. I was paying my own debts. I was paying my own tuition.
For the high school?
Yes, for the high school. It wasn't as tough in high school, but the international students do have to be like all the way independent once they get to America because especially as an African, like our currency is not as strong as the dollar. And so if you have a bill of $1,000 in Kenya, that's 100,000 Kenya shillings. And I'm sure there are very few Kenyan people that can afford to pay that per semester or something. So
that's a lot. Yeah, for sure. So like, did you have to work when you were in high school?
Yes,
during the summer.
Yeah, in high school I didn't work as many summers because my tuition wasn't as high at the upper school. Yeah, but I definitely work all semester long. Here I do work.
And there were jobs at the high school to do that?
Yes, I worked in the library. I worked in facilities over spring breaks and some summer breaks.
Oh, okay.
I worked as a tutor for a little bit. I like new jobs. I like trying different jobs.
Do you value the work experience? Do you think it's been a good thing for international students?
Personally, I think the reason I like to work in different areas is because I don't see the jobs we do as a source of income. I see them as a source of skills. Like, yes, they do give you the income. They do give you like finances to stay here. But the biggest value they have is the skills they give you. Like if I never worked in the library, I would never know how to be a good like customer service person and all that stuff. If I never worked facilities, like I can weed whack, I can plant flowers, I can take care of like beds and stuff like that. So it's definitely super beneficial in terms of skills. If you work dining, you kind of learn how to cook. If you work in the pub, you know how to work the dish room. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like an international student from Principia can easily get into any workforce simply because they have so many skills.
Absolutely. So why I've heard that international students can't work off campus. They have to have jobs on campus. Do you know why that is?
So when you're on, what we have is called an F1 visa. An F1 visa is a student visa, and with a student visa, you can only work on your campus unless you're in an internship that is directly related to your major.
Yeah.
And I think it's just one of those laws that, yes, they do protect you from, being exploited as an international student, because I know if I could work off campus, I'd be putting in like 80, 90 hours a week. Because if I can, I would.
You would want to do
Yeah,
that?
I would definitely work as much as I can, but that's just the kind of person I am. Like, if
do you think that like if you were able to work off campus, that there would be jobs that maybe pay a little bit more and you would have to work less hours?
I don't think being paid more would convince me to work less hours. I think being paid more would make me work more in those jobs. Because if I'm working 20 hours a week at Prin, and there's a place that would give me like, $20 an hour, I'll still work 20 hours a week. But that's me. Like, I love to work. I love responsibility type of thing. But it's all visa stuff. The visa just restrains us so much.
That sounds hard. So is it true then that like a lot of international students that are here at the college come, like it's hard to pay print bills sometimes, I've heard, because the way that students are paid here, it's like 10 an hour, and sometimes, it's just not enough.
It's extremely, it's impossible.
It's also just like a lot of hours. Yeah.
I think in my case, it's impossible for me to pay my fall semester bill off. There's no logical way that I can 100% complete it. And so from the moment you come in freshman year, I feel like it's a system that sets you up for failure, because you can't pay that fall semester, so you're in debt in the spring. So in the spring, you're paying some of your fall and your spring, and so you're always working to pay off Principia for the most part. And I feel like if they balanced it more, where like you pay less in the fall and more in the spring, I think would be a very fathomable thing. Because like, yes, you do have to pay a print bill, but in those 20 hours a week, you have to buy your own laundry detergent, you have to buy clothes, you will run out of meal points, you have to buy more meal points and all that stuff. So I know the fall semester is probably the toughest semester for every international student financially. And I mean, there's been conversations with administration. I know I've had many conversations with them about like solutions towards easing that out. And we're still trying to figure out what's the best way that we can help, especially international students, have a better fall semester, while at the same time, this Principia is not like being harmed in any way as a result of that, to find a good middle solution.
A good middle ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. That does sound difficult. Is it like I know you worked at Cedars. Does that help?
Yes. If anyone can work at Cedars, I highly recommend you do. Because
we talked about this in our last podcast, how they will, as of now, start giving like $5,000 scholarships if you work there. Yeah,
but I think my understanding is it's either you get the scholarship or you get paid. I'm not sure on how
one or the other.
Yeah, I think it's one of the other. Right for now, I think. I'm not. Honestly, I have not looked so much into it.
Okay.
But I do know that when you work at camp, you don't pay for food, you don't pay for housing. You spend less money because you're going off the camp a lot less. And so financially, it's
a little easier.
It helps you a lot. It could help you get out of debt. I think the pay should be, I think, more than Principia. Like what you have at the end of the summer should be more than what you would have if you stayed on campus and paid for break housing, paid for food and all that stuff.
And if you were like working all year at Prin College. Yeah. And I've heard that it's a really hard thing to do, and it can be mentally draining as well. But I mean, you have to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And I understand that. What has your experience been as an international student, like socially? How, like, you're student body president, and so in a way you speak for others, or you have an influence. And from like your observation of the college, how do you think the dynamic is socially between, well, Kenyans really, and like African culture, as well as like other international students? Can you tell me about that?
I think we live in a world where you are going to interact with the people who you relate the most to.
Yeah.
If you go into the dining room, you'll sit with the people who either look like you, talk like you, or act like you. And so with that, it means that a lot of the times international students are drawn to each other. And you'll find like for example, there's a table which I jokingly call Africa because
Yeah.
it's always only African students on that table. And I don't think that's wrong.
No.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's just like when I walk into the dining room and I look around, I'm going to go to the people that I feel like I'm going to have a conversation with, the people where I feel comfortable, where I feel at home, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think socially, like international students do hang around each other a lot. But at the same time, I think we still get to interact with local students, like on the sports field. The rugby team is very heavily international.
Yeah,
but we
it
have
is.
local students like Jacob Warwick and Nick Isminoglu, and they're all like part of our rugby family, you know, in that entity. When we're in rugby, we all interact together. When we're outside of rugby and at such different capacity, we interact a lot. So I think we have figured out a system that works where you do hang around like international students, but at the same time, I do see a lot of international students branching out to meet local students and local students branching out to meet international students and get to know them a lot more.
Yeah. So do you think like, well, for international students, do you think it's easy for them to make friends maybe outside of maybe what they're used to? Do you think that like other cultures like Americans that are at Prin or Colombian, French, German, that there's a sort of friendly social environment? Or do you feel that maybe there's some discrimination or even possibly racism?
On a personal level, I have not experienced like racism or discrimination on campus.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always going to be like people who don't know, like what people call ignorance.
Right.
Like someone's going to ask, like I know a friend who was like, someone asked me if we have cars in Africa. Like,
cultural ignorance.
yeah, like it's just like, to me, it's like they've not been educated. And to me, that's not that person's fault. That's the system that they're in's fault. Like, you know, the school system, someone should educate them.
Yeah.
But I think socially, personally, I mean, I'm a social guy. Like I recharge socially. I talk to people as much as I can. You know, it's very personal. It's, do you want to get to know the other person? If you don't want to, we can't force that.
Right, of course. I worked at Crystal Lake Camp this summer. It's an international camp. So there's a lot of different international students that go there, as well as students from Mexico, not necessarily Principians, but I learned a lot about the idea of cultural respect and learning how to adapt and like coexist. And I think it's I would encourage Principian students to interact more with international students because there's a lot to learn. When different cultures interact, I think in a positive way, we can grow together really well. And I think that's important. Speaking of cultural differences, I want to get into what's it like here versus back home. What are things that you like, dislike, etc.?
My honest opinion, if Principia was in Kenya, I would prefer, like, you know, obviously, like, Kenya, I love the weather. The weather is way better. It doesn't get way too hot. It doesn't get way too cold.
Okay.
Food-wise, like, obviously, like, people say no one will ever cook better than your mother, which just means, like, the food at home will always be better to you. And so like, in terms of food, like I think there's a huge difference. And dining services actually does a great job to try and get international dishes in their their menus. Like I know one time we have something called ugali, which is like a meal, like a cornmeal type of thing. And I saw it at dining and I had it and it was actually pretty good. And so Principia does try to get, the feel of home on campus. But I think the food is the biggest thing that impacts international students. It's just such a different type of food, but eventually you get used to it.
I've talked with a few international students my time here, and some of them have told me that like they just don't eat the food here because it's too different. It's like a culture shock thing. So they'll just get rice and beans every time.
Yeah, there are people who eat rice and beans almost every day, and
I feel like that's a big issue. That Prince should maybe, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So Gloria, the dining services rep, we're trying to see, because yes, dining can try to make food like home, but it's never going to be as good. Like they're going to try their best, but it's never going to hit the same. And so they are trying as hard as they can to get cuisines and like recipes from different countries and cultures. And I think it's mainly an issue now because Principia just realized like, hey, we have such a big international like
presence.
Yeah, presence that we need to incorporate their home lives into the campus. And so like now is when we're seeing like a lot more international foods come up. So I really hope that Principia continues to try and get like different international foods, because even like as a Kenyan, I want to try food from Colombia.
I haven't really noticed like any South American dishes.
Yeah,
no. I mean, there have been some African dishes that I've noticed, and like a lot of American or Southern cuisine, Japanese. That's a new one. But when it comes to there's a very large, I would even say European maybe not as much, but there's a large South American presence on campus. It would be very nice to see more of their culture displayed here.
Yeah, I mean, South American food has kind of snack into like American food. Like we do have tacos.
Yeah.
Here we have like we have salsa. We have like the food. I think the reason why the African food is more present is because there's more Africans than any other country on this campus.
Really?
Because there's people from South Africa, there's people from
Uganda,
Kenya. Yeah, Uganda. Kenya has
Nigeria.
the largest international population. There's Nigerians. There's so many like
there's a lot of
African
Kenyans.
students here compared to any other like international country. And so I think that also has an influence into like what food you see, like, because I think also the Africans also like are very more willing to speak up and be like, do you guys want to do this? Do you guys want to try this? And so I would encourage like any student who's like, there's this food from home that I wish Principia served. Like, I would encourage you to please like just talk to me if you need to. Like, I want to see those dishes there. I want to see Principias go through the line and be like, oh my gosh, I love the food. This reminds me of home. Like, I want to see that in students.
That'd be great. I feel like there is some, but maybe it's just not enough because there are still, I would say, a considerable amount of students that are not happy with the food. Yeah,
and definitely, like, I think I'm hoping it's gonna improve, at least, like, for the rest of my time as student body president. Like, I'm looking to see, like, what more foods can we add and work with Gloria on, like, into trying and get those foods out there. So,
what are some things that are strange about America? Maybe a culture shock for you. And I know you've been here since you've been 15, but I'm sure you have lots of stories. And like regarding Prin, what are some things that have been a culture shock for sure?
I think my culture shock came from the type of people Principians are. Principians are super nice. Principians are super smiley. And especially for me, that I see as a red flag because I'm like
really?
yeah, because it's scary when someone is like all nice to you. So you're like,
You wonder what their intention is.
Yeah. And initially, especially when I was younger, when I went to the upper school, I was super quiet because I was like, all these people are so nice to me. Like they must want something, or there's no way they're just nice to me for the sake of it, you know? And so that kind of caught me by surprise. But I think right now I just understand that that's just how Principia is. People are just nice here, and that's just life here. And so, yeah, that got me on my back foot.
Are people not like that back home?
It's not like they're not like that. It's like at Principia, they're overly nice. Like
It's a bit much.
Yeah, there's like, I don't hug people randomly when I see them back home. Like you don't just greet everybody.
Everybody greets everyone all the time.
Yeah, and then there's this thing of like when a car is passing by, they wave at you and you wave at them back. That doesn't happen back home. Like
no.
When someone is driving past, they go about their business. Like I think Principia just does
I think that's Principia. I don't think that's so much an American thing, because you'll go to other colleges and you might as well be invisible if you don't, put yourself out there for sure.
Yeah.
But like they have millions of students. Okay, that's a bit much. Maybe 3,000, 4,000, 10,000, and yeah, you definitely had to put yourself out there more. Whereas Prin is like there's only 400 students, and everyone here really wants a sense of a very loving and open community. So it's a special place. I'll give it that.
For sure.
What do you think life is like for graduating students? Students that maybe want to stay in America, or probably they end up going back home. What are the opportunities after college?
I know that companies are a bit reluctant to hire international students because of the paperwork that comes with it.
In the United States?
Yes. Yeah. It's not easy to hire an international student because you have to sponsor their stay. They have to get a work visa. There's so much especially risk that the company is taking, because if I take you, James Ives, as an example, an international student, and you end up becoming like, I don't know, a criminal, or like something happens, you run away and you violate your visa. Yeah. Like that company, the next time they hire someone internationally, it's like, well, the people you keep hiring,
they end up having to take responsibility.
Yeah. And so it's not easy for companies to hire people, but there are a lot of companies that want international students out there. And after working with the careers office, the future looks very promising. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's going to conclude today's episode. For sure. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, James.
I really appreciated it. Tune in next week for more fun topics. We'll have Leander next week on investments. Thank you.